Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Welcome to Mesa County Compass. This afternoon we are interviewing Dave Nutting with the Alpha Omega Institute here in Grand Junction. Welcome, Dave, and give us a little information about yourself, please.
Oh, okay. Well, I have been trained in the natural sciences and mathematics, have advanced degrees in both geology, then mathematics as well, and used to be a staunch believer in the theory of evolution. And I understand that with this election coming up, this could be a big issue right now. So my background is that I've taught all over the United States, different parts of the world, on the creation versus evolution controversy. Now, a lot of people think evolution is science and creation is just religion. And I'll get to that more, but one of the things that I have to say is I used to be a staunch believer in evolution until I studied the scientific evidence. And it was the scientific evidence that convinced me that there were major problems with the theory of evolution. And you might say, after doing a lot of studying, both my wife, Mary Jo, and I evolved from evolutionists to creationists, and it did not take a million years to do so. And so we go around the country talking about major evidences for creation and some major problems with the theory of evolution.
And why we thought that this was a topic that we might want to discuss just a little bit today is that many times people that espouse that their belief is in creationism or intelligent design, that they're considered to be uneducated and strange and maybe a little crazy and maybe shouldn't be a school board candidate if that's the belief that they hold. Not that they're proposing that we change it, but just saying maybe we should teach both sides.
It's a possibility to do both sides. First of all, the idea that somebody who believes in creation is ignorant is not at all founded, because there's hundreds of PhD scientists who accept creation because of the science and have found out that the evolution doesn't work. They did it, a good share of them, on the basis of the scientific evidences. And so the one thing I like to say about it when we hear of our candidate that is running, Barbara Evanson, that she believes in creation. How could she? She's gotten a lot of flack on that. And the flack because people saying, well, evolution's a fact and creation is just religion. And it turns out evolution is not a fact. In fact, I usually say in some of my seminars that I do all over the country that evolution isn't science even. It is a philosophy that is posing as science. It is actually the pillar of what would be called the naturalistic worldview. And that worldview would state that everything in the universe, including the universe itself and all life in the universe, arose on this planet strictly by natural processes without any possibility of a designer or God at all. And that if you want to be a good scientist, we hear so frequently, you've got to believe in naturalism. You can't believe in creation. You have to endorse evolution. And that worldview of naturalism has been taught now in our schools for almost 40 years. Okay? And it's hard to get around because most of the people reading the newspapers these days, and it sounds like those people writing some of those articles against creation, are saying that have been totally indoctrinated in the idea that evolution is science. And that is absolutely not true. For instance, okay,
Yeah.
for instance, one of the things that was put out in the article, I think Barbara Evanson said that if the Big Bang is taught, then creation ought to be taught. Well, that was an opinion. That doesn't mean that's what she would institute if she was on the school board. But the thing is, the Big Bang, is it really science? So many people accept it as science, but Discover magazine is a magazine 100% committed to the worldview of naturalism. And they said right on the front cover of their magazine about the Big Bang, how did the universe come into being? It says, the universe burst into something from absolutely nothing. Zero. Nada. And as it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere. How is that possible? That's a good question. But then they give some kind of a theory of one of many that they say is, oh, this is science, but most all the theories have been proven wrong already. And so nothing exploding. That doesn't sound too much like science.
So when you say that it isn't science, what qualifies something to be scientific?
All right.
And a theory. What does it need in order to be considered to be a scientific theory?
Okay. Well, there are two types of sciences. One is empirical science, and the other one is historical science. All right. Historical, basically the idea of going back in time. Nobody was there. Nobody could see it. Okay. And so you come up with theories about what it looked like in the past. The empirical science, which is the type of science that put men on the moon, says it's observable. You observe it. You come up with theories. You can repeat those experiments you have, and you can actually falsify those things. And that's what it takes to be a scientific theory. And otherwise, it's speculation. Just a little bit better than speculation. It's called a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. Okay? But it's not a theory necessarily unless it can be tested, you might say, and proven wrong, called falsified. But historical science is very different when we try to figure out what color stripes this dinosaur had on it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of speculation, a lot of artwork, the whole ape to man sequence. There's a lot of artwork that's involved with that too. And I like to go around to the schools and tell people, if I can get in public schools, but at least other places, I like to tell the kids, when you see artwork like this, you ask a question, what's the evidence? And you find out the evidence does not support evolutionary artwork. It's very frequently, like they may take a few bones and make the entire skeleton, and we say, students, what do you think? You think that's a good, would you be able to come up with something like that? No. No, that's great artwork. And so that's the sort of thing that we might talk about in our seminars. And then also we might give positive evidence for creation. For instance, amazing evidences of design. There's a group of PhD scientists that they're called the Intelligent Design Group. They have some marvelous material. I mean, really, really good stuff out there, giving evidence after evidence after evidence that this is an engineered, designed system, and you have hundreds of those systems in your body. Okay? And yet, Dr. Scott Todd, who testified in a Kansas school district, and listen to how he said it. He says even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded in science because it is not naturalistic.
Oh, he said because it's not naturalistic.
That's what he said. So what he's saying is we want to keep these students chained to that box. And basically chained to the idea that everything in the universe has to be explained by natural processes. And students don't even think. Don't think about anything else. Thinking is not allowed. And I came up with an interesting slide that I used at universities when we were just speaking at several universities in the last few weeks. University of Minnesota, and another Minnesota there one. And I said, right off the bat, I said, I don't care what they say here in the classroom, but here in this particular program, thinking is allowed. It's allowed.
Good idea.
How many teachers who are sold out to evolution will allow a student to even question it? And yet, so many of the arguments that were presented as fact for students, as this is fact, you've got to believe it, this is science. How many of those arguments were proven false 50 years ago even?
Can you give an example?
For instance, similarities of the embryos. They used to say that at one time in your life, and they'll show you a picture, you had gill slits, a yolk sac, and a tail, like a fish. Therefore, you have fish in your ancestry. And they will say that, and this is, they show a picture of a baby 2 months in development, and basically,
Seen that?
you might have seen those pictures. The problem is, the gills aren't gills, they're not slits. They're pouches that develop into certain features of the neck and jaw region. Never oxygen transfer, not a gill, period. The yolk sac in humans never contains yolk. It's a blood-forming sac because the blood is formed in the long bones. And the 2-month-old baby, as it's progressing there, before it's born, doesn't have long bones yet. And so it needs something to form that first blood. As soon as the long bones take over that function, this thing drops off. And the tail, even though in the picture it looks like a tail, and they label it this way in textbooks, it's not a tail. It's just grows a little longer than the spine, eventually will close in. It's an extension of the spinal column is what it is. But it just looks good. And, great proof for evolution, right? Wrong. So that's just one example. We can talk about the peppered moth. Some people have called it the best evidence for evolution because these moths kind of change from a light color variety to a darker color variety as the Industrial Revolution progressed in Europe. And they said, the darker moths were eaten for a long time. Now we have the tree barks darkened. Now the dark moths can hide, and that'll become the predominant type. Well, great. That isn't even evolution because you start with moths, you end up with moths. And then they show these gorgeous pictures of moths on trees showing the camouflage, and this is what happens. And so many books even have a type of, and computer programs that go along with it to show, what would happen if you keep on doing this? Well, all they get is moths. Okay, that's number one. But the interesting thing, the textbook pictures that they use with the moths on the bark of the tree are all bogus. In order to get those pictures, they had to glue or pin those moths to the bark of the tree. Moths don't even land on the bark of the tree. And one researcher said in 25 years of research, they have never seen one of these moths, land on the bark. They always live underneath the foliage. And they come out at night. And that's two big problems. So there was a book printed in maybe 8 years ago, and it was actually called The Myth of Evolution. It's the myth of the peppered moth. Okay, and but all the stuff is still being taught to our students all the time, even though they know it's bogus. Okay. Piltdown Man, considered a half ape, half man. It was nothing but a hoax. And they took him about less than 30 years to determine it was a hoax. But guess what? You still see it in museums, and you still see it in some textbooks. Okay, Piltdown Man, nothing but a hoax. Somebody took the jaw of an ape, filed down the teeth, put it together with the skull of a modern man, and then hid it for a scientist to find. And sure enough, they found it. And and then they came up with the Piltdown Man, which deceived a lot of people into believing evolution was a fact. And we can talk about that. We can talk about all of the latest finds that's come out in just the last several years that they're using to try to substantiate that you came from a monkey, okay, or a monkey-like creature. And but so many that they don't mention the problems with it.
That's true. And so why, expanding on that, why is that a concern in education today if we say we can't teach both sides of any issue, and but we still want our students to be able to think?
I think
does it overlap into other areas?
Oh yes, it does.
That would be a concern. And is it a concern to have someone say that they believe in creationism? Is that a concern for the quality of education or the quality of candidate they would be for that position?
Number one, they found out that if you're taught both models, you will know both models better than you did if you only had one model. That's been scientific research on that. And so it's best to go ahead and give both sides, okay? And one-sided in education is indoctrination, okay? And it doesn't help the students think. But if you present some of the issues with, what questions should you ask? Oh, what's the evidence here? All right, then the students are thinking, they're engaging, and they're going to be a lot better off than somebody who just sits there and soaks it all in like a sponge. And besides that, what happens in the future when he hears somebody say evolution is not science, it's philosophy? Oh, well, that guy's got to be crazy. Okay, and for sure, that's what happens.
And they say that evolution, that's where I hear it's more evolution is a fact. And what does that, how is that different than saying evolution is a theory or a law?
Well, the fact is elevated way up there, isn't it? Whereas evolution is a theory, that's true. Evolution is a theory of how we got here on planet Earth, but it's also a philosophy of how we got here that's devoid frequently of God. Yeah, you can throw God in the picture. God used evolution as his method of creating. I used to believe that until I studied the scientific evidence. Then we found out that the evidence didn't support evolution. Why throw God in there? Okay? But at the same time, if you're taught it's a fact, okay, question is closed. No more discussion, right? And if you say there are some major issues with the theory of evolution, we need to explore these. Let's look at some of the scientific evidence and say, okay, does evolution support this better or does creation? And like one of the things I love doing these days is talking about the literally thousands of molecular machines that are in your cells. You have trillions of cells. And these little machines are so tiny you can't even see them with even the most advanced, sophisticated equipment. And plus a little extra, you can get a pretty good picture of what it looks like. Okay? And you find out the cell is like a city. And you have a chemical factory, you have a computer center, you have highways built in the cell by proteins that manufactures these things called microtubules. These are inside the cell. And then you have a UPS type delivery guy running down the highway that was just constructed with a bag of proteins to take to the other side of the cell to put into place into a machine that rotates at 9,000 revolutions per minute and grinds a proton with another chemical, and out pops your energy. I mean, when you look at all of the steps necessary in order to do it, it's just ludicrous to say this happens strictly by accident. But our students are taught, oh, you've got to think about science. You've got to be naturalism, right? You have to have that. And so they stop short. Even though it looks so good, there can't be a God. So we have to come up with some explanation. And usually the explanation they give for such tremendous detail is, well, I guess we don't know much about that yet.
Yeah.
Science is working on that issue. Are they really? Okay. Now,
The last question, and I'm afraid that people will see this podcast and they'll think, well, Mesa County Compass is promoting religion and a faith in God, and that this goes beyond the scope of what you should look at a school board candidate when they bring up creationism. Why is it that it's considered to be just God based on one hand? Some of the things that I've read is some districts now will put in the front of their textbooks that evolution is a theory,
okay.
and it's not a fact.
Okay. But it's still presented as fact.
Right. So is there a danger in saying that we're teaching creation if we were to teach creationism, which, again, it hasn't been taught for 40 years at all, but if we were to teach creationism, is that putting religion in school?
That's when people would say that, they're suffering from the idea that evolution is science and creation is religion. You can study the scientific aspect of creation entirely and come to the belief that evolution is wrong and creation is right, or intelligent design is right, one of those two, without even understanding or thinking about the Bible. You can do it. All right? And people think, oh no, evolution is just religion. That's because we've been programmed to say that over and over and over again. How many have ever heard that? Almost everybody will raise their hand. And that's not true. It's just not. And so, yes, I can look at the scientific aspect, even without God. But when I see certain features, I'll say, that looks like an engineered system. If it's an engineered system or a design system, what does that usually imply?
Yeah,
a creator.
There's a creator, yes.
It's a creator, okay? That's why they do not want intelligent design arguments even presented in the classroom. I think they should be presented in the classroom by people who are capable of handling it. Now, I don't want an atheist instructor, say, try to present what creation is telling me or is saying, because it's going to come out with a major slant. Okay? I'm not for forcing the teaching of creation in the classroom. And I don't think Barbara is either. The thing is, it can be allowed, and so why not? If you have an instructor that says, hey, I don't think evolution is going to explain this, I think this is be better explained by a creation model, I think that teacher should have the right to be able to do it without getting fired, which is happening in many school districts right now. If you even question the idea of evolution, oh, you must be religiously motivated, they'll say. No, not necessarily. You can be a good scientist and realize there are major problems with evolution. This is better explained by a design argument or a creator.
And we do change our ideas as we get more information.
We do.
And in other areas,
Well, and we
that's
should be
okay.
able to.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the whole thing.
Yes.
We should not have it dictated to us which way to think.
Right.
Well, that happens so often, and the students always then end up thinking, oh, I guess I better be an evolutionist if I want to be a scientist. We've had instructors tell us that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you want to be a good scientist, you got to give up your idea of creation, your religious beliefs. And some of the students are belittled because they don't accept evolution.
And very confused.
Oh, they're very confused.
Very confused.
Yeah.
Well, you've been watching a special edition of Mesa County Compass where we give you the facts as we see them. You decide.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you, Dave.
Thank you for the invitation to join you.